Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. So today, the lovely people at Arrtx have once again sent me some markers for me to try out and show you guys. So right here, I have the 60 color direct liquid ink acrylic markers. I'm going to be showing you guys the back of the box so you can kind of get an overview of all the colors that are in this particular set. And I'm super excited to try these ones out as they are going to be a little bit different from some markers that I've tried before. So right upon opening, we are greeted with our colors in kind of like 4 separate trays. Now, luckily for the packaging, on the sides of the container or box, you actually have like little areas that you can actually slip out the boxes from, which I find very convenient. So you can see that there's a lot of yellows, oranges, reds, we have some browns, we have some pinks and purples. Here we have a lot of blue and green colors. And then on our very bottom tray has a little bit more of those greens and more of like neutral grays and our black at the very bottom as well. So let me show you guys a close-up of the actual markers. So this one has kind of like a clear body with little windows for you to see the ink flow. But this is the type of marker that you are required to shake to make sure that you're mixing up your paint well before using your marker. So I didn't shake this one quite yet. I'm just going to show you what the tip looks like. It's already well saturated. It has more of like that felt tip kind of texture. It has a really nice point. I feel like it holds a lot of paint, and I do like the fact that you don't have to pump these markers. I always find those types to be very messy and a little bit unpredictable. So I've already shaken this one up. We're gonna shake the rest of these up later, as well as do our quick little color swatches. So in this sketchbook, I like to keep a lot of my color swatches or testing out of different materials for traditional medium. So I went ahead, made a very uneven, but we made a nice little swatch chart so that we can swatch every color so we can see how they laid down, just like as an overview. I highly recommend that if you have like a particular type of paper or surface that you want to work on, it's good to do a test on that surface first if you're worried about color or consistency. So I recommend doing that. But for just like an overview of what the paint looks like right out of the markers, this is kind of the look of them right now on this particular paper at least. Also, remember to shake up your markers nice and good because you will see some color separation in some of the marker colors. I don't find it too bad with any of these markers, but if you do see a little bit more streaking or wateriness or any like color separation, just do a couple of more shakes, do a little bit of a test swatch, and then continue to use your markers. So today we're going to be doing 2 pieces. So the one that you're seeing right now, I did end up using the Paul Rubens like linen canvas boards, I guess they're called, or like linen panels. And I am going to be doing a old-ish art trend. It's not really super old. It is from this year. And a few of you guys probably have seen it floating around, where basically you draw characters kind of like in profile view facing one another, and the silhouette of their profiles kind of make up a kind of good silhouette for an apple core. So that is what we are going to be doing today. But because the apple is going to be the main focus of the drawing, I'm going to keep our characters, which I tried my best to draw both Ivan and Till from Alien Stage because I was unsure on who to draw that would work for kind of this particular trend, I guess. I think most people do end up doing some sort of couples or pairings or ships, so I feel like Ivan and Till is a very common one, so I ended up drawing Ivan and Till. And as for the mediums, so we are going to be painting the entire apple, and I will block in the background as well with the paint markers. But right now I'm using a fine liner because I don't want the characters to suddenly disappear, and I was kind of like unsure how I wanted to approach the characters because I wanted them to be more pushed into the background, but I didn't want them to lose detail completely, so I didn't want to leave them as a sketch. So majority of the colors will be just focused on the apple. I thought it'd be kind of fun to just paint something that wasn't a character to test out the full range or as much color I could use into one object, because I do have not exactly a gripe. I feel like it depends on the art style that you have or your art process. I found that a lot of like acrylic marker sets in general have a lot of light colors and a lot of mid-tone colors that are very vibrant, but there's not really a good selection, at least in my opinion, of nice dark colors. I feel like there's maybe 4 to 5 dark colors that you can potentially use out of like a set of Sometimes it's only 30, sometimes it's 45, sometimes it's 60 or even larger. I feel like most people who use paint markers do gravitate towards using those very vibrant poppy colors. So I understand why the color range tends to lean more towards something like a lighter color or very bright mid-tone colors. But for me, who likes to push contrast a little bit more, I'm often limited towards using purples and blues and then usually black to really push the contrast. I would like if there was either like a really dark brown or like a really dark green that would help flesh out a little bit more of like the color palettes. But like I mentioned, it's definitely tailored towards, I think, people who want that really like vibrant poppy kind of pop art kind of style of drawing, or like graffiti kind of painting where you're using black as like your main outline color. So I totally understand why it's like this, but I would just like to see more dark colors like in other sets maybe in the future. But for the most part, the fun thing about working on this apple, because I didn't really have to focus too much on any dark areas at the moment, I did get to play around with just the hues of the different colors that were available. So even though our apple is very much just red, and typically the inside of an apple core is kind of like a beigeish yellow faded color, so I tried my best to layer up more of the lighter colors inside the core, and then any of the mid-tone colors was kind of like fair game for me for the outside of our apple. Now, hopefully you can kind of see what I mean, that the characters, if they're facing each other, kind of have enough ridges to make up the, I guess if you like chomped around an apple and you were just left with the core, maybe not like a super clean eat around the apple since you're leaving a lot of the top and the bottom, but it's kind of fun having a bit of those details kind of like break into the apple core to give it a very unique looking shape. And I've seen like many different variations of this where people include more of the bust and like the shoulders. Some people do purely just like the chin to the forehead, so not including the neck. It's just like very much up to you, but I thought it was like a very cute trend to see, because one, you get to see how people approach drawing and coloring an apple and leaving the faces very barren or very simple. I just thought it was a cute trend. I'm usually late to trend, so I do apologize if this is something like very outdated at this point, but I did try my best to utilize a lot of the reds. I think I used majority of like all the reds available. I pulled out a lot of the purples, which allowed me to kind of link it a little bit towards some of our blue colors to make things pop a lot more. I used like a turquoise and like a mintier color, and I tried to incorporate some of the colors that I used in the red areas back into the core of the apple as well, so that it didn't have too much of a separation in color palette. But I think this was just like a fun way to do a very loose-ish painting. In general, I think I would categorize at least like my method of drawing and painting and all of that and the things that I enjoy very much like more towards planned and controlled to a certain extent, rather than being very spontaneous and allowing myself to play around as much with like letting loose, letting forms just like suddenly form through build up rather than like heavily planning things, which you'll see a little bit more in the next drawing that we'll do, because I plan out sections a little bit more meticulously in terms of keeping my sketch intact and making sure I had room to put my line work, or if I'm separating colors purely via value rather than just like fussing and fiddling around with some different types of hues for every area. Oh, also, I really didn't like how Till's like shoulder-ish area was looking next to the apple, so I ended up filling the entire background to be black so that it would just carve out their heads enough. And then I needed to bulk out the back of Till's head as well, so I ended up layering a few layers of white to make sure that we get more of an opaque finish over top of our black background. But I think this one was kind of just a fun piece. This kind of like smaller square linen panel was very fun to work on. I'm kind of glad I did tilt the apple to its side. I did end up making Ivan's face a lot larger just in general compared to Till's, which I didn't really like how unbalanced it was, but I think for the apple's proportion, I think it's okay. So maybe I don't dislike it too much. To kind of like finish up the entire piece, I didn't know if I wanted to add a little bit more value here and there to both Till and Ivan. So for Till, I ended up putting the little piece where I think he's covering up his name on his neck with a little bit of that teal color, because I feel teal kind of represents Till, and then we have a little bit of red into the eyes of Ivan because I feel like that's one of the only colors that's really present in his color palette. He wears majority like all black. He has black hair, so it's like, oh, his eyes are also like very dark. It's just like very subtle hints of red in his eye, if anything. So yeah, ended up just doing a little bit of shading and smudging around of a red colored lead, and just use that to kind of highlight some areas to warm up the skin just a smidge, but I wanted to keep everything still very simple and monochromatic so that the apple stands out the most. But let's move on to our next painting. So once again, I am going to be utilizing our Paul Rubens like little linen panel. This one is much larger. I think it's like maybe 2 times larger than the one that I did of Ivan and Till, but we are going to be working on Durin today. So I know people have requested me to draw Auroron, and I don't know if I was like up to the challenge. Maybe it was because I was a little bit discouraged with the fact that I feel like Auroron has a little bit more of a darker color palette, but you can kind of see I've done Mualani, I've done Kinich, and I've also done Kachina, so people wanted me to continue with more of the Natlan characters. So maybe in the future I will, and maybe I'll do like a mishmash of the different acrylic markers that I had and we can do Auroron justice. But upon like opening up the acrylic marker set, I saw a lot of these like very cute bright pinks and purples we can kind of see on the left hand side of my camera footage at the time. I thought it fit Durin very well, so I wanted to at least attempt to draw him. I don't think the other pieces that I've drawn digitally of him I like too much. The Halloween one's kind of cute, and I think I did like a sketch page of him very briefly. I want to redo like my Duran drawing and do something a little bit more fun because his character is very, I don't know how to explain it. It's a little bit more unique because of his situation. So I want to do something a little bit more on the cutesy side if I can, or maybe do something with both Albedo and maybe Wanderer as well. We'll see. But for now, let me explain my process for this one in particular. So the one for Ivan and Till, I very much just blocked out our 2 flat colors. So like a red and then the inside of our apple core. For faces and characters, typically I like to work on the face first. So ended up doing 1 layer of our base tone for Duran. And then I started doing something that I did not do for my previous acrylic marker drawings of our trio from Natlan, which is a blending of the markers. Usually I go for a more cell shaded look, and you could argue, well, don't argue, I know it is. It's still going to be a very much cell shaded look, but there's going to be some areas that had more of like a subtle shift as more like a blended gradient. So these markers dispense a lot of this like liquid ink or paint. So with like the side of the pen, I was able to do a lot of mixing and layering together, and I wasn't really too scared of doing blending with the tip of the marker. I wasn't scared of like ruining it or anything. I feel like it's very sturdy. It has a very nice point, but there's like times where I get impatient where I don't allow myself to rest my hand completely on the canvas, so I might have a little bit of wobbly lines. But that tip is very flexible, it's soft, but if you use very light pressure, you can get very sharp lines, or if you lay it on its side, you can get very nice, smooth, even coverage. And I tried to take that to my advantage when I was trying to do some of the blending. So I did very subtle blending for both the neck shadow and shadow where the hair covers the face. And then as we worked on the actual hair base color, which I'm working on right now, I ended up also trying to blend some of that skin tone color back into the bangs or any areas that kind of surround the face to give it more of that softer look, which I think there's like better applications of certain gradations of colors with these markers in some areas, and then other areas are going to look a little bit more choppy or very streaky. So it's a little bit more like patience. You can definitely like, I've seen people blend with their fingers, or you can blend with a brush or like maybe a Q-tip or something else instead of just blending physically with the markers if you don't want to like have excess residue on one tip versus the other, or you just don't want to have a little bit of that streakiness. You can have a little bit more control if you use some other object like your finger to like smudge it around to get more of an like, even blending, if anything. So more of like a choppier-ish gradient I did for his eyes. I feel like it's not too like, there's not like a super harsh edge, but I don't think it was like a super even gradation either. But I really liked how I did his eyes. Other like illustrations that I've done of Durin, I feel like I never do his eyes justice because I could not see a good image of it. But now that we have like more material for Durin because he's finally released, I have a lot more references that I can kind of like go off of. So I was actually very happy with how this entire piece will eventually turn out. So for the most part, I end up layering kind of like section by section, but I'm being conscious of leaving certain areas with very, very thin lines, kind of like messy wobbly lines at this point of certain sections if I don't want to exactly lose the shape of certain areas. So let's say the hair where he has his bangs kind of like crisscross a little bit. I want to make sure I don't lose my initial sketch line so that later on when we add either shadows or my line art, I don't mess up the shape too terribly, I guess. And typically when I work on, I think the trio for Natland, I very much did the line work at the very end of our painting session. But for this one, I did get a little bit impatient because I do switch from different areas like at a time, and sometimes I run out of things to do, and either I can stop recording and just like take a break for the entire piece to just, you know, dry more evenly so I don't accidentally reactivate areas. But you can kind of see that I ended up doing a little bit of some line work here and there for the eyes. I'll do it for the hair, and then I'll go like a little bit into the face, and then I'll continually build up darker and darker values until we reach to our final layers, I guess. But I did end up keeping this piece also very simple. One is to match the rest of our Genshin characters that I've done previously, and I would like to kind of have like a consistent look among all of them, but just try out like small different things every so often. So in this case, I did more gradations. So Durin's little hood? I don't know what you want to call it. It's like a very big kind of hood thing that like sits kind of just past his shoulders in a way, but it has like a very similar gradation to his eyes in a way, where it goes from kind of like a purple to more of a violet and or like a pinky orange, but it's like much more subtle. So it's kind of like one of the other areas I ended up doing like a gradation, which I think I did it very poorly on the right hand side of the canvas board because it's very much streaky. I could have went and did like another extra layer, but I don't think it was like too detrimental. I did end up forgetting, and I think I still haven't done it, put basically white detailing in the back area of that hood thing that sits near his shoulders, because I think that would also help draw attention away from the streakiness, because it's going to be cutting into that shape and kind of breaking it up, so it's not like a very uniform streakiness going all the way over the colors that I wanted to blend over. Also, I think like right here, you can see more clearly the areas that I didn't want to lose like my sketch lines. So in Durin's horns, there's like areas where I did my best to block out both the shadows, but then if any of the shadows touch each other, I left a little bit of like a white border. So later on, I will kind of remember to outline on top of where those lines are. And then one, it will cover that area, but two, I'm using it almost as like a backwards sketch in a way. So leaving white areas as my sketch lines rather than having everything be more like darker on my canvas, if that kind of makes sense. So I ended up working on line art at this point, and I kind of like flip-flop between line art and then filling up some gaps with color to get a smoother application. But the initial color that I started with doing the line art is kind of one of our dark purples. So there's one that leans a little bit more blue, which is the one that I ended up doing the majority of the line art for Durin. And then there's a more kind of like warmer one, which is the one I'm using right now in place of black for Durin's outfit, because I wanted to have a little bit of color variation in his outfit, but I didn't want to use straight up black right away. I do think it's a little bit easier to sometimes work from the darkest color and pull out your highlights, but in this case, it just works better in my brain, where I will pick the mid-tone color or sometimes it's the lightest color, and I kind of just build up our values instead. So I'm going to do a little bit of that for the darker areas in Durin's outfit. I was trying to see whether or not I could get away with using as little as possible of black that I could, but I wanted even more contrast after I ended up doing the first layer of purple for the line work. Also, around like his face, I ended up switching to one of our mid-tone purples so that it appears a smidge bit kind of like softer around the face. But then later on, I think because I do end up darkening up our line work a few times, especially with using black to really push those areas, I don't think it really mattered for me making the areas around the face that much softer, because like I said, I'm going to push the liner even darker at some point, so it's gonna kind of give a little bit more of that softness regardless. But I do think like at this point, he's turning out very cute. I definitely did not spend a lot of time trying to figure out his outfit per se, so I definitely did just stick with more or less the headshot. I ended up putting his hands last minute, which kind of is the reason why they don't really feel like they belong. I did end up adding them during the sketching phase, but initially, if I wanted to add the hands, I would have liked to include them earlier on so that it feels a little bit more natural. I did end up also changing his expression a little bit to be more either like pleading or being sorry or a little bit more shy and meek rather than more of like a neutral expression, which I ended up sketching him with because I was gonna make him do like the finger gun type of thing under the chin, like as if he's thinking kind of pose, but I'm not too sure if that really fit his demeanor, so I ended up going something a little bit more cutesy and a little bit more shy because he's kind of like low-key like a newborn-ish in terms of like he's learning a lot of things. I feel like he's a little bit naive in some areas, you know what I mean? Oh, also, so other than adding more darker areas for our line art, to kind of make everything pop as well, I need to add more highlights. I did find that some of my lighter colors, let's say our very light yellows and whites, did require a few more layers to build up to more of an opaque consistency. It could also be the fact that maybe it does have a little bit more of like a watery consistency for the paint, so it being on something slightly less porous might leave a more streakier and more watery application. I'm not too sure. I think in the future I will use it in my sketchbook to do a quick test. From like previous acrylic marker sets that I've used, a lot of them I feel like get very dry whenever I use them in my sketchbook because I feel like the paper is so porous that's like sucking out the ink. So I never really liked as much using them in my sketchbook if they didn't have some sort of like ink reservoir that I could see so that I could know that my pens or my paint pens or whatever were not like running out of ink, and it was just like, you know, I might have to like reactivate it, or if they have a pumping mechanism I could do that. Oh, I also forgot to talk about this. So a few things I like about these markers in particular. One, they have a cap that has like the little clip to it so they don't roll around, because they do have a very smooth round barrel, so it would have been a nightmare if they didn't have something to stop them from rolling. I do like the fact that there are little areas that you can see the little paint reservoir so that you can make sure that you do have any ink, or you know how much ink you have left in your paint markers. And then as well as the caps feel very secure and they have like a nice snap so you know that they're fully closed. But not having to pump these markers is always just much more easier for me to use. It's just less of a hassle in terms of accidentally maybe pumping too much or shaking it too much and releasing too much ink out of your paint markers and having like blots of ink appear on your illustration. But these ones have such a nice like controlled consistency of, or at least like the flow is very consistent for me, so I knew how much ink was going to come out, and for the most part I never had any areas that had like a very big blot of paint come out, which is very nice because I'm always worried about that. If it's like something I'm using a medium for both painting larger areas and painting very small areas, I want to be able to have a good paint consistency for the small areas as well as the big ones. So juicy enough that you have even coverage, but also not too much paint that you're leaving large blots and you can't get like thin lines. I was able to get like quite a bit of thin lines when working on Durin, so I'm kind of glad I could just use like the one marker to do basically everything. But here's kind of like the finished piece for Duran. I wish I added a little bit more hair to his, I guess like mullet-ish part, but I think overall he turned out very cute. I'm glad I went with the illustration for Durin because I really like the kind of like pink and purple-ish kind of colors here. But here's also the little comparison with the one that I did of Ivan and Till. So it's basically, yeah, I think it's like 2 times bigger. But it was very fun to do both the apple painting as well as the one that I ended up doing for Duran. But last but not least, I wanted to show a little bit of a comparison of the ones that I did for the Natlin trio. So these were all done like with different paint marker sets. So some of them had like very easy line art, like the one I did of Kachina, and then the other ones had like a variety of different like brush type markers. All of them very fun and easy to use. So I do recommend just checking out Arrtx in general for a lot of like paint markers if you're interested in trying any type of paint markers out. I'll make sure to link anything in the description. And thank you again to Arrtx for sending me this marker set to try out. It's always been fun trying out these paint markers, and I'm always glad to do a lot of these like little Genshin illustrations from time to time. So I think that's it for today's video. So I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye!